Greetings to all of you. I want to talk more in depth today about the energies that we're experiencing as we're approaching this full moon, April 16th, and moving through the profound Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which will go exact on April 12th. I know that many of us are experiencing a lot of turmoil, a lot of shifts as we're moving through these very intense energies. So I thought it might be helpful to dive deeper into what these energies are about and how we can work with them in the most conscious way in order to move through this time, not only as gently as possible, but to access the healing that is there in this time and the deeper meaning of the transition and transformation rather than getting caught in the tumult of this time. So let's look at the chart. So here we have the chart of the full moon. And as you can see, the sun will be in the sign of Aries opposite the moon in Libra. And what's very powerful about this full moon is that both the sun and moon will be squaring Pluto. Pluto is the planet of transformation. So it's calling us through this very intense time of transformation of our sense of self, transformation emotionally. And what is it that we're being called to transform? What is it we're being called to change? We're really being asked to change our sense of self as separate Aries from each other and from the world around us. We're being called, Pluto squaring the moon, into a deeper sense of our own emotional process to come back into balance and harmony, Libra, within ourselves and in relationship with each other. What's also profound is that this is following that powerful conjunction with Jupiter and Neptune, April 12th. But the energies of that conjunction are going to continue to reverberate very strongly for at least another month. And this Jupiter-Neptune combination in Pisces is sextiling Pluto. So it's really a powerful part of the transition and transformation that we're in. And as I've talked about in that last video, Jupiter and Neptune are asking us to dissolve what we need to let go of in order to move through this time of transformation, to move into these new ways of being. And what is it that's dissolving? In part, in that they're in the sign of Pisces, we're being asked to bring to consciousness what we need to release, what we need to heal at an emotional level in order to move into that spiritual expansion that they can offer us. The other piece of this dissolving that I think is important is the way in which it's calling us to change the ways that we think about things. I think it's very significant that at this time of the full moon, Uranus is right next to Mercury. We're being asked to shift how we think about things. And we're coming out of a 5,000-year period of patriarchal way of thinking and being that is really about being left brain dominant, having this separate sense of self. I examine what's outside of me, research it, study it, analyze it, determine what it's about, and then how I'm going to interact with it and or control it. That's the left brain dominant way of thinking. And part of what the Jupiter and Neptune are asking us to dissolve is that way of seeing the world, that way of knowing and thinking. We're being called, Jupiter, more into right brain ways of thinking, which is about honoring our intuition, seeing things more holistically, realizing our interconnectedness with all that is, that we aren't separate, that we're not in a relationship of self and other or self and object. We're in a context where we're all interconnected and interacting. And how do we understand things in that more holistic way and also in a more intuitive way? So part of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is asking us to dissolve that way of analytical separatist thinking, to come back into more connection with each other and more of an empathic, compassionate, right-brained way of knowing. I think it's also significant that this Jupiter and Neptune are asking us to dissolve our old patterns, our old ways of being and thinking, to open more to our intuition and to a higher state of consciousness. And at the time of this conjunction and this full moon, and in an ongoing period, Sedna is right on the North Node. The North Node is what we're being called into. What is our growing edge? And Sedna on the North Node is calling us into that understanding that Sedna carries, that we are in a time of profound transition and transformation on the planet. Remember that Sedna is that planet with the 11,400-year orbit that moves out into the farthest reaches of our solar system, communes with the other star systems, brings that wisdom back to us, circles in close to our solar system. And when she's in that configuration, that part of her orbit, this is the time where the Earth is called into profound change. The Earth herself is transforming, and we are called into a new level of consciousness as humanity. So Sedna is that messenger of the profound shifts that we experience in these approximately 12,000-year cycles. And she is calling us into that profound transition now. And if you remember, the archetypal meaning of Sedna is connected with the Inuit goddess of the sea. And I've talked in previous videos about that profound story of Sedna. The Inuit story is of this maiden who sets out on a spiritual journey of initiation. And she ends up with Raven, the shaman, on this isolated island in her own journey of transformation. And in the story, her father tries to find her and forcibly bring her back to the village. It's very symbolic of his wanting her to stay in the paradigms of the past, the ways of the village, the familiar ways of being. But she has set out knowing she needs to go through her own time of transition and spiritual transformation. He forces Sedna into the boat and starts back to the village. And Raven, the shaman, circles back from being out hunting, sees the father taking Sedna back to the village. And with his wing, he sets off this huge storm at sea that now is flooding the boat and threatening their lives. And the father realizes he won't get back alive if he keeps Sedna in the boat. So he tosses her overboard in order to save himself and throws her into the sea. Sedna, in her terror and in her panic, tries to cling to the boat and climb back in. But the father, in his desperation, in his fear, strikes her hands with his paddle, breaking her fingers, and she watches as her fingers float into the sea and dissolve, becoming the seals and the waves beneath the surface of the sea. And in that moment, Sedna realizes there is no going back to the ways of the past. There is no safety in her father's boat. And she surrenders to the storm. She surrenders to the sea, diving deeply below the waves, and dissolves and transforms into the goddess of the sea. This story is guiding us to claim what the gift of this time is all about. We are being called to dissolve. We are being called to surrender and release the ways of the past, to realize we can't go back to the village and how things have been in the past. We can't, as we're feeling in these stormy times, we can't cling to the boat and the forms of the past to save us and rescue us. We are called to surrender and open to the transformation that we're in with faith, with trust, and to dissolve into this higher consciousness. This is the gift of Jupiter and Neptune. This is the gift of Sedna. And Pluto is trining Sedna right now, and Jupiter and Neptune are sextiling Sedna. All of these energies are in a dance, guiding us through what we are needing to release in order to move into that higher consciousness. It's also significant that Pluto is squaring Erisina and Pallas Athene that are right next to the sun at the time of this full moon. And Pluto has been squaring Erisina for a number of years now and will continue to square it until 2023. This is a powerful energy that is calling us, Pluto and Capricorn, to break down the structures of the past collectively, as well as leaving behind the individual patterns we need to let go of. And Erisina is that amazing planet that, unlike the other planets in our solar system that follow the path of the ecliptic, she is 44 degrees off the ecliptic and is very symbolic of the importance of our daring to step out of conventional ways of being, to follow our own unique spiritual and creative path. We need to dare to step off the beaten path and follow the path of our heart and our soul. And Pluto is guiding us to realize that this breakdown of the systems of the past is opening us up to this phenomenal capacity to be in our creativity in radically new ways, individually and collectively. And with Pallas Athene close by and at the same degree of Erisina right now, it's saying we will find that path of creativity by trusting our intuition and opening to those other ways of knowing. It's really important to realize as we're in this shift, things can be very confusing and very disorienting. The shadow side of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction is getting caught in illusion and delusion. And I think part of the challenge of this time is we are so bombarded by information and so bombarded by misinformation and disinformation that if we're staying caught in that left brain analytical way of thinking, we can get caught in confusion or gather evidence that seems to support our beliefs and get caught in illusion or delusion. And we're seeing a lot of that in the collective as well as playing out for people individually. Part of the transition that we're in is moving from a third dimensional way of being where we see ourselves as caught in the realm of physicality and time and space and forget that we are a part of infinity. We are a part of the oneness of all that is. We are a part of cosmic consciousness. we are being called to let go of that identification with third dimensional reality. But right now we're in the soup of the fourth dimensional realm, which is the realm of thought and emotion. And we have to navigate that storminess in order to move into the higher consciousness of the fifth dimension, which is that unity consciousness, that energy of light and love and awareness that we are infinite beings having a finite experience. We are soul selves in human form. To navigate the storminess of this fourth dimensional period, we are like Sedna in the stormy waters, and we need to let go of that sense that we can cling to the boat, get back to the safety of the village, and everything will be okay. We are in a time where we have to surrender to the waters of Neptune and Sedna, calling us to dissolve these old ways of being. The challenge of this time is to not get caught in fear. When we get caught in fear, we try to cling to what's familiar, to what gives us that illusion of safety and certainty and control. But the boat, the ways of the past, are the ways of the fathers, are not the path of safety. We need to let go of those patriarchal ways of being. We need to be willing to hold the trust that we're being called into radically new ways of being. And the bridge through this fourth dimensional reality to the fifth dimensional reality and higher consciousness is to trust this transformation that we're in, to not get caught in fear, to not get caught in illusion or delusion or the fantasy that we can figure this all out with our analytical left brain ways of thinking. But the other aspect of it is that I think is very important is Chiron in Aries, which is a part of this stellium in Aries at the time of the full moon. The bridge to that higher consciousness is through healing. Jupiter and Neptune are bringing to the surface whatever is unresolved for us emotionally. So we're not only dealing with the level of our thoughts in the fourth dimension, but our emotions. And if we aren't addressing our trauma, if we aren't healing the wounds from the past, we are likely to get caught in projection, caught in illusion that is formed by our filtering reality through our emotional trauma from the past. So it's time to heal, time to take seriously diving deep, South Node in Scorpio, into those deeper emotions, being willing to dive into the realm of the unconscious, what has been buried beneath the surface, in order to bring it to consciousness, in order to heal. And then we can be in alignment with our soul selves. Then we can live from the heart. Then we can open in trust and in faith in this transition that we're being guided through. And we can open to that higher consciousness. If we try to get to that higher consciousness without doing that healing work, we're caught in spiritual bypass, and we will actually get stuck in the fourth dimensional reality. If we dare to do that deeper healing work, we can find our way into alignment with the soul self that is always deeply in communion with cosmic consciousness, and then be guided by our intuition and our inner knowing and our connection to cosmic consciousness into those higher states of consciousness, into living from the heart, and into being homoluminous ones, beings of light and love. And then as we do that, We hold that consciousness for the collective and can support the shifts in humanity. We need to do this work now because we're seeing the shadow side of the storminess of the fourth dimension playing out not only in the emotional turbulence we're seeing around the globe, in the confusion and illusion and delusion at the level of thought, but we're seeing it in the acting out of the old paradigms of the past, including violence, power over, exploitation of others, destruction of the earth. We are seeing the shadow side of humanity playing out very intensely right now. It is the reactivity in the story of Sedna, of the father in the boat. I'll kill even my daughter in order to save myself because I'm caught in fear, I'm caught in terror. I need to cling to what feels solid and certain for me. That path leads to destruction, and we're seeing it around the world right now. So this is a critical time for us to do our own inner healing work, to do our own dissolving of what we need to let go of from the past. Look at your chart. If you don't have a chart, go to astro.com, get a free chart. Look at where the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction lands in your chart. What are you being asked to dissolve and release from the past? Look at where Saturn and Uranus land in your chart with where they are in the sky right now. Where Uranus is calling you into those new ways of being, those new forms. Where Saturn may be in your chart because it's in that Saturn-Uranus square, maybe where you feel stuck, where you want to cling to the boat or what's familiar, or the forms of the past. Look at what you're facing in your own healing journey and be willing to let go of those ways of the past. Be willing to, like Sedna, let go of the boat and open in trust to the dissolution of our old sense of self, our old ways of being, even our world as it's been. Allow it to dissolve and trust that out of that dissolution comes new life, new forms. Sedna becomes the goddess of the sea. We have this capacity to expand into Homo luminous ones, to move into that fifth dimensional consciousness, to be coming from a place of compassion, consciousness, oneness. To get there, we need to do that healing process and dissolve what we need to release from the past in order to open to the new forms, the new life, the new world we're being called into. Let us continue to support each other in this process, to hold the awareness of the meaning of this time, to not get caught in fear and the storminess and turbulence of this time, but to hold each other in this healing journey, hold each other in compassion, to move through the storm into new ways of being. Blessed be.